Dang, that's hard. BetterQuestionsEmail.com. First of all, if you are watching this and you are not on this email list, today, right now, is a really good place to do it, really good time to do it. BetterQuestionsEmail.com. And tomorrow, I'm doing a real kind of like in-depth review of the last several emails that I've been writing. So if you are at all interested in risk and thinking about what to do about coronavirus and what risks you're willing to take in life and what ones you aren't, this is a really good time to jump on and catch up. And that's at betterquestionsemail.com. So I'd love to have you over there. Let's talk about risk a little bit. Recently, I've been kind of getting involved with some kind of one-on-one coaching. It's been interesting. It's been something that I didn't really expect to do. I didn't anticipate doing it right now. I thought I was going to be more in the kind of the sort of course space, and I am still doing that. But I jumped into coaching mostly because I was forming relationships with people that I was interested in, and I said, I think this is a part of myself that I want to express and know more about, this part of myself that can kind of have this mentorship role. And so I jumped into that, and I've got 3 people kind of doing it right now, and it's been very interesting. Okay. And I'm learning a lot about it. Some things I'm good at, some things I'm not good at, right? Problems I didn't anticipate, some things I did, some things went better than expected. And it was in the process of talking about this with one of these people, these coaching clients, that I sort of said something in the moment that struck me as like, yeah, that's kind of the thing that I do. The thing that I do is I try to treat my life as much as possible as an experiment. And there's a couple really important corollaries to this idea that your life is an experiment. The first is that there's no such thing as a bad experiment. There can be poorly designed experiments, but there's no bad experiment. Because even when, like if you imagine the beginning, you think back to high school chemistry or science or whatever, and you think about the scientific method. It's like, well, how do you start the scientific method? You start the scientific method by saying, what is the hypothesis? What's my hypothesis? And you posit a hypothesis, and then you test it. But the thing is that if your hypothesis is wrong, meaning the thing you predict doesn't happen or isn't borne out in the data, that's not bad. It's not a failure. It's feedback. Because even if you learn, for example, that something you believed is wrong, and then that's not the case and it's not reality, you are smarter after that than you were before. Your mental model of how the universe works is now more accurate, even if only in the omission of inaccurate thought. So there's no such thing as a bad experiment. And likewise, if your life is a bad experiment and you think, okay, my life is composed of a series of small experiments and I'm going to do and I'm going to see what happens and I'm going to get feedback, there is no such thing as failure in this instance. There's no bad thing that can happen. You get an outcome, and it either is the outcome that you expected or it isn't, and that is feedback. A good example of this is about last year, I was toying around. This was before I figured out that I like to do this, whatever this thing is. And I was working on kind of a different business model that was going to be kind of content related. And I got clients, right? I got people to pay me. Make way more money than I'm making right now doing this, which is nothing, right? And I have people paying me, and I'm getting the work, and people starting to like it, and I shut it down. Well, why did I shut it down if it was working? Well, I realized after I was doing it, I didn't enjoy it. And I'm at the part of my life where I'm like, I'm already like halfway through my allotted time on this earth. Do I really want to spend the next 10 years or whatever doing something I don't even like? The answer is no. So I shut it down. It wasn't a failure. It wasn't a failure at all. It was feedback. And feedback is critical. So that's corollary number one of this idea that your life is a series of small experiments. The other thing is that, well, okay, if my life is a series of small experiments, let's say I accept that premise, well, how do I structure those experiments? And the way you structure the experiments is with the minimal possible downside with the greatest possible upside. It seems logical, right? This is kind of an investment thing. You want to invest when your possibility of making $1 billion is, even if it's small, you can make $1 billion, but you're only ever going to lose $100. Even if the odds are long, you might take that bet. Now, the problem with this, right? The problem with this is they're like, well, okay, but the problem is in real life, decisions have consequences. If I want to move to a city that I think I'm going to love, but I don't know, so the upside is high. I could be living in a place that creatively fulfills me and surrounds me with cool people, but I might move to a city that I don't like, and I might be stuck there, and I might not have any money. I might not be able to get a job. It has real consequence, right? It's not investing. I can't just say, I don't want the downside. I only want the upside. The trick to this is understanding that the actual downside is very rarely as high as we think it is. Meaning that the worst case scenario is usually not that bad. In modern Western society, which is, again, I'm talking to you. I'm not talking about the rest of the world. I'm just talking about you right now. If you're watching me on the internet, all right, we're all pretty privileged. The worst that's going to happen to you is you're going to die. The absolute worst thing that happens is you die. And that's bad. You're not going to feel it, probably. And the reality is you're not going to die. Let's say you move to that city and you don't like it and you don't get a job and you barely have any money and you're just scraping by. Millions of people have been in that situation. And chances are that in the process of doing that, you're going to learn something about yourself. You're going to learn something about what you like and don't like. And the next decision you make is going to be better. In reality, our anxiety about the potential downside far outweighs what the downside actually typically ends up being, which means we can think about these experiments in a different way. We can think, look, even if I am putting something on the line, how does it really stack up in comparison to the potential payoff? Because here's the third corollary of all this. If your life is a series of small experiments, or you only get feedback, and you try to structure these experiments so that you get the biggest possible upside and the minimal possible downside, but in reality, the downside isn't as big as you really even think it's going to be. Third corollary of that is that you can fail the vast majority of the time and still be wildly successful. People look back at a track record and they say, well, like, I did this thing and it didn't work, and I did this other thing and it didn't work, and I did this other thing and it didn't work. And I just say, who cares? Who cares? You only need one. You only need one. If you're trying to start a business and it fails, you try to start a business and it fails, you try to start a business and it fails, you are getting better every time if you're paying attention. You only need one, because remember, the potential upside is a lot greater than the potential downside. So you only need one. You can screw up, you can fail most of the time, and you can still end up ahead. But the thing is, you got to do the experiment. The only rule to this is you can't opt out of the process. You can't stop going up to bat. You got to be at bat in order to hit the ball. You got to play in order to win. You got to do the experiment to figure out what you're going to do that's going to succeed. And if life is a series of small experiments, and that's all it really is, that process just never stops. It certainly hasn't for me. That's what this is. That's why I'm talking to you. Just testing it out. I hope that makes sense. I hope you're doing well. I love you, and I'll talk to you soon.